Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of conversations from North Bennet Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. Before we get into our conversation, we want to thank the many supporters that make our programs possible, including the Massachusetts Cultural Council and our partners in craft. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Kristen Odell. I'm an NBSS staff member and host of In the Making. Today, here at NBSS, we are joined by Ainsley Donaldson, right here to my right, a person of NBSS firsts. Ainsley was the first woman to graduate from the cabinet and furniture making program in 1973. She then, after many years, returned in 1984 to become the first admissions director of NBSS, which was North Bennet Street Industrial School at that time. I'm so grateful that you still engage with our community at NBSS and that you're here with us today. Thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, NBSS students, for being here with us, and grads. Let's just jump right into the big question of how did you end up at NBSIS? It was the industrial school at that time, folks.
Can I show them my favorite possession, which I donated to the school?
A true vintage.
Industrial school. I had decided, since my husband Tom had finished his MBA at BU, that it was my turn. And our children were still quite young. They had just, I think one was in happy hours nursery school and maybe one had just started kindergarten. So I felt like I could take the train in because we live in Melrose and right near Cedar Park Station. So I could get into town. And so I decided we had moved to Melrose we lived on Beacon Hill, the backside of the hill, for a couple of years after we moved up from New Haven. And I had made an offer on a house in Melrose when it was people were just starting to discover it. It was sort of and it was on the train. Tom took the train into Boston, and I was looking for somewhere I could get to easily and then pick up the children after school or something. So I started with the only school I had ever heard of was Wentworth. So I called them and asked them to send me a catalog, and they wouldn't because they didn't accept women. And they did have some kind of cabinet for it. I knew I didn't want to be on the ladder and on the roof in the middle of winter. I didn't want to be a carpenter, but we had bought this falling down Victorian, and I thought that I really needed to, learn how to use tools, at least for, some things. Both of my brothers, my older brother and my next younger brother, went to Yale and were at Yale Architecture. One was at Yale almost, and one at Yale Architecture. But I knew I didn't really want to be an architect. I really wanted to make stuff. And
you wanted to be able to repair your home.
And I wanted to be able to work on the house.
Yeah.
My husband was not particularly handy, although he had flunked out of electrical engineering at Yale. But he did turn out to be a pretty good handyman electrician. I must say that.
Can I ask you, what was the culture and at that time for you? Did you have any resistance from your family, your neighbors, your peers? your community about coming into the trades. I know you came in specifically with the mission in mind to be able to repair your own home. Was anybody giving you resistance around that?
Absolutely not. I didn't think that there would be. I mean, I assumed that it didn't matter. And so when I applied to Wentworth, or couldn't apply to Wentworth, I mean, that was kind of a reawakening, or awakening to maybe, I might have some difficulty finding a place. But I do remember I came in to North Bennet for an interview. They say I was the first director of admissions, but somebody interviewed me. And I must say, he wasn't particularly friendly. And I told you that
he's not here, so
he's not here. Yeah, I don't see and he'd be even older than I. He'd be 100 years old now. I remember he made some joke. I don't know. We were talking about something, and I am left-handed, and I may have mentioned that I was left. He said, "Oh, well, they have left-handed hammers."
So tell us about, once you were here, tell us about your classmates. What was the environment like in your bench room?
We were in the old building. George Fullerton was the teacher. He was an enormously polite and very, I would say, respectful of me being in the class. And the students were very respectful of him. And I think that may have set the environment. The students were all ages and all backgrounds.
You mentioned similar to how we are now, high school veterans, second
veterans,
career.
Vietnam veterans just coming back.
Mm-hmm.
What's the program, the state program, placing people in
workforce
yes,
job placement.
yes.
Yeah.
And some college. I was the only woman. I think I was the only one with children, with young children, but I never felt any reason to not trust anyone in the class, and they were very, I would say, respectful of me coming in. I never, not to say that if there were some here now, I would love to hear what they were thinking.
What your classmates are thinking of you.
Into the class, but I never got, and they always were very helpful and sometimes horrified at what I wanted to build. So in high school, I grew up in Atlanta. I went to a private co-ed, but we didn't have classes with boys. And there was no such thing as drafting or anything like that. I really started from nothing. I had never drafted at all. And Phil, that was part of the curriculum. And the first thing I made, and Mr. Fullerton, George, I called him Mr. Fullerton. He was always polite to me, and he would never have said anything, to. So the first thing I made was a pointy bookcase about this wide and pointed like this, out of pine or something, for my laundry room in the basement. And as I say, everyone was horrified because it was pink and yellow abstract is how I painted it.
So this was off curriculum.
Well, you could make whatever you want. And even though I had grown up in a home with Empire sofas that were my great grandmother's from New Hampshire, and my parents were antique collectors, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make my own stuff, and nobody complained, and they could, they could have been black, but they were great. I mean, I looked forward to coming in every day, and I loved coming into the North End. As I say, I'd grown up in Atlanta, but I always wanted to live in Boston. And I've just been lucky that I have been here since I came east to go to Smith, and had started on, was going to teach history. I did end up getting certified to teach industrial arts, but the only one I knew was woodworking. I didn't know,
Would you have taught?
auto.
Would you have taught woodworking here had the opportunity presented itself?
I wouldn't have been good enough. I don't think so.
Let me let's pause there. Just after we're in the moment of you being a student, and I know you don't, and many of us don't really love carrying the tagline of the first woman, or the first this or that. It's very important to us, as you know, that you were the first woman to graduate from the program. But for you and for many women who who engage with or participate in a field that is predominantly male, it's just really we just want to be there doing the work, period. It's not so much that we want to have this tag on us. Talk about that.
I don't think that after I had started that I never felt like anybody was saying, oh, look, any of my classmates, as I say, they could have been, but certainly not to me. So I don't think it had anything to do with the school. I never felt in any way discriminated against, or either by the students or anybody at the school. It was always welcoming, and I was always happy to come in every day. And so I say, my classmates, they may have thought, well, she's underprepared, but they were always helpful. Always.
You've said, you've been very honest with me about how you didn't even really think about that because you came from a place of you had the opportunity to fail. If you had other backup options, so all of your eggs weren't being put in this basket. So you talked to me about that earlier, privilege.
Right. I felt that I never worried that if I did fail, that I couldn't do something else. And I have spent, this end of my life, I mean, I'm 80, and I have had many jobs in different areas, but this was something that I really wanted to do, and I've continued to be involved in things like woodworking and friends in all kinds of areas. And I did get certified to teach. I substitute taught woodworking in I think Malden, Tewksbury, I subbed in Melrose too, but did not pursue that.
So after you graduated in 73, and then in 1984, Tim Williams found a grant to hire you back as the first. We're just going to go with that you were the first. Someone interviewed you, I know. We're going to say you're the first director of admissions for the industrial school. The industrial school dropped its I in what year? Shortly thereafter.
I don't know.
It was shortly after
I
you were
think
admissions
so.
director.
Yeah, because I have another.
Yeah.
That's the old school.
That was the old school.
But not the industrial school.
But so you became the director of admissions in 1984, and with a grant that Tim Williams found, you increased the number of women in the school overall from 19% to 27%. Those are numbers that we
I never knew that number.
It is written in stone, so we know it. Yeah.
Oh, great.
At the moment, we're at 40%. So, this is sort of built, where we are now is built on your legacy. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll take credit. I didn't even know it.
But can you tell us about that? It was a short span of time that you were director of admissions, and you told me that you were more of a cheerleader than anything.
Yeah, I was a very enthusiastic administrator, I think is what I would say.
What does that mean? You didn't like the paperwork like none of us do?
No, I just wanted to make my stuff. You get on the train, you come in and go home, but no, I don't think that was my call.
Do you feel any memory of having, the importance of that position at that time? I mean, you created change here within the program as a student and as an admissions director. Do you remember that feeling of wanting to?
I do remember that there were certain goals that I thought were important, and I did like talking to people about what they wanted to do and trying to match them up, thinking wondering if they would be happy here and do what they wanted to do too. I do remember that.
Which is wonderful. That's a quality that is still part of the admissions process here. I see it on Sharon and Rob's desk. They kind of identify where people's hands go and what program might make the most sense for them.
Yes.
I really love that. Okay, I'm going to move us from there to something that I always think about with graduates from the past, that when you were a student in 70, well, it would have been 71. You at that point, you had 89 years of institutional history of the school already existing. So when you came here in 71, how much a part of your education was that? Was it really important to you? Did you think about it, or did you just come to school and get the work done?
No, I did think about it. Because we had lived in Boston on the Hill, and I had always wanted to live in this part of the country, and excuse me, and so when I interviewed in the North End, I was thrilled to be here, and was happy to commute into Boston and learn more about the history and of the city. And also, as I say, in Melrose, we were people were moving in and buying up these falling down houses, because for the same reason that people moved out of town from the North End to the suburbs like Melrose. And the train came to Melrose in 1845, and it started to develop all these wonderful Victorian houses. And no, I was thrilled to be downtown and in this environment that was encouraging, craftsmanship. And I was an early member of the Victorian Melrose Society, and we started doing house tours and slideshows of the Victorian houses in Melrose and the different styles and how that developed. So yes, to be in a historic neighborhood here was really important to me and quite key, and still is. I mean, we still do those tours, and people continue to restore these houses.
We talked about this earlier, and maybe some people here can relate. Ainsley and I both, well, I grew up in the South, Ainsley in Florida, parts of Florida,
yes.
Georgia, and your first experience visiting a city like Boston is transformative at that age, and it kind of sets in motion your love of these historical, not only structures, but city history, institutional history, and so I can see that throughout your, the homes you've lived in and you becoming a student here.
Yeah.
Just the love of that history.
Yeah, coincidentally, when I was in high school, I did take art, and I was making something that was almost like encaustic, this long, thin picture, and it was crayon or something, but the idea of it came from a magazine article and picture that I had seen. I think it was like in Vogue, and it was Beacon Street across from the Common up to the State House, and we ended up living there just two blocks over, and all of those wonderful houses. And as I say, to be able to come to North Bennet every day and sort of have this around me was very satisfying. And I hope I'm not romanticizing it, but
I think that still exists for everybody in this room.
I hope it does.
I mean,
I hope it does.
It's very different because our world is very different now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and that was one question that I wanted. I don't know if you can answer this, but can you describe the energy of the place at that time? I mean, I think about your program where you had Vietnam vets in your class and people right out of high school. I mean, what was the energy like?
What I loved, and which I think is here just as well, it was much more intimate because the space was more intimate. But like I've called in at least 5 times this morning because the traffic was, I left that, so it's 11:30. I woke up at 6. I was so worried about getting into town and driving, and I don't mind driving in Boston, I'm used to that. I left the house at 7:45 to be here by 11, and I was sweating bullets I did, because the truck knocked down all the stuff on Route 1, and the McGrath was just like
So the traffic is what is the difference of energy.
Yes. But anyway, but what was great, every time I called in, is it Marlo?
Marlo's downstairs. Marlo's not up here.
So cheerful, so encouraging, like, you're gonna make it, just, go on. And I don't know how many times on the phone she told me how many stop at this stop sign and then go around on this. And I do remember Lillian, who was one of the stuff, and it was always so welcoming. I can't remember the janitor's name, who was always there. And George Fullerton was wonderful, and David Betts was there later, and Robert Adam, and everyone, was so encouraging, and the students were so fun. So yes,
I feel like, I think it's safe to say it still is that, right? Can I say
hope
that?
so. I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so.
Can we turn that into your love of community? You are so engaged in your own community of Melrose. You're very much still engaged with this community. You've said this is your favorite alma mater.
It is. It is, absolutely. I tell people this is my favorite one.
So you've just mentioned all of the reasons why, the love for the welcoming, the what you feel when you're here as a student, how welcoming it was then and still is. What is it that most motivates you to stay engaged in your community, both in your town of Melrose and North Bennet?
Probably I was born a cheerleader. I just, all of those things that I learned, and it's a small town and easy to be drawn in. And I've been there now, I can't believe it, that I've lived in Melrose for well over 50 years, 60 years, maybe 70, 90, yeah, almost getting there. And I never thought that would be true. And I think the longer you live there, and it has a historic district. When you're walking on Main Street, you run into people that you've known the whole time you've been there. I'm also in Rotary. I started a RE/MAX office also. I've had many careers, so I know a lot of people local that it requires that you participate in your town, and my parents always encouraged it, and the schools that I went to, they always encouraged that, that sort of you have to give back to your community. And as I say, I'm always happy to tell about North Bennet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Anybody think of questions you might have for Ainsley, including our virtual guests? And while you're doing that, you should probably know what's behind us. This is many of Ainsley's furniture
Stuff.
Pieces
Yeah, this is
way
my
too big
stuff.
to get out. Probably won't even, I probably wouldn't have a doorway big enough to get out of your home.
I know.
Big, built structures of furniture. But this we were able to pull off the wall. And I don't know what year you carved
I
this.
can't remember.
Okay. Well, it's important because it's the first, it's the kernel that was the seed that became the plant that brought you to North Bennet. It's a carving of the aerial view of your home. And
So I did learn how to draft.
but it's poignant for this conversation because you moving into this needing, this home in disrepair, deciding that you need to learn how to fix this yourself. It kind of culminated in this and your career here.
And it is also, it's my community. So this is my Victorian house, which is on the corner. It had a huge, one of my neighbors was an ad gal, and she had just gotten an 8-foot tall A and one. She was apparently doing something for A1 sauce or something. and so her house was here. My house was right on the corner here and up high off the street. And I put the number, it was number 1 North High. So I took this huge one and it went on the side of my house, and everybody knew what my house number was. And also, so this shows, here's El Pond in Melrose, here's the train that both I and my husband took in to Boston. Here's the Charles River. Here's the skyline of Boston. And this is my picket fence and my tower. I had a big tower at the house had, and it was up like actually almost 5 stories off the street right there with a stone wall. And actually, it took me 4 or 5 years to shingle it. I took everything off, I shingled it, one side a year. So I did have carpenter skills, and I was on 3-story staging, metal staging, and I was the shingle queen of Melrose. And one day I was up there, way up there, and a woman came by in the car and she drove off the side up onto the side. She was going like this. So anyway, so I did maintain some skill.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And the piece that I wish I could have brought in, when I left North Bennet, I joined, I don't know how I found it, but I joined a shop in Cambridgeport, down between Sydney and Brookline, that I commuted into every day, of like 21 or 22 woodworkers that were in different, it was Cambridgeport Cooperative Wood Shops, and I belonged to a group of 7 or 8, which fluctuated, called New Hamburger Cabinet Works. And the name had come from, it had started as a commune in, I think, New Hampshire. And they had upped and moved, many of them, to Boston, but like classics major from Yale, a history major from Harvard at Hamilton, and there were women in that cooperative and in New Hamburg. So that was another sort of boost. I mean, I didn't know there were any, but we did all kinds of commercial. I was doing some commercial. I'd get a job like building all the crates for Harvard, sending an exhibit to Washington or Oregon or Indian art or something like that, or milling 10,000 feet of walnut. Or I know we worked on, I don't think it's there anymore, the Coffee Connection.
Mm-hmm.
We made all the cabinets for that. Cherry, I mean, they were pretty fancy, and they were there for years. All I remember is one of my partners, Carol Neville, who eventually became a well-known lawyer. We were gluing up a cherry cabinet, and Carol had written inside one of the joints, we were gluing it up, "This joint is FUBART." And we sent it off, it was there, it was fine.
When we forgot to really get into this, because you did have many years as you're saying, as a cabinet maker after you were a student here. So you actually went into the field and worked, but at what point and why did you decide to leave that industry?
Because the building, which is on Emily Street, it was 16 Emily Street between Sydney and Brookline, going down to the river, was being sold. It was a factory building, and I haven't been in it since it's been renovated, but I'm sure it's now.
I know the building, isn't it MIT now? Or?
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
it had been bought, I don't think right away by MIT, but eventually. And most of the woodworkers in the building were moving to Charleston to a new place. And by then, I thought, I think
And did the whole group disband?
New Hamburger, no, several different iterations of people.
And
So
you just, this is a
I'm gonna
good
do some, yeah,
time to
this is a
bow
good
out.
time.
Is that when you got your realtor's license? Not quite yet.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Which is still tied in. I mean, you the amount of
Absolutely, I wanted to sell the houses that I was living with and that I knew lots about. And being a realtor is kind of like being insured.
I have one last question, and you all as well ask your questions. And I didn't prep you for this one, so you can you can go with it or not. You can tell me to go home. What is there something that you would change about this whole journey that you've been on?
I don't think so, because I've gotten the best of a lot of different worlds and have been very fortunate and privileged to be able to do that. I certainly have no regrets about the physical and crafty skills that I was fortunate to get. I mean, to be able to practice doing that, and it comes up every day. Things,
How so?
do well. Particularly, as I say, living in the town that I do, it's every day when you go downtown and you see how things have been restored, great, seeing North Bennet Street's name in the Globe all the time, like for Notre Dame and the rest, all the restoration. Thanks.
It's both this big huge world and so small. I mean, the Notre Dame, the Notre Dame press, and then the typewriter repair person who's coming here in a couple of
that up too.
Yeah. So that person used to repair all the typewriters for at the old school. You probably know him.
No, I don't know him, but I certainly read and cut out the article just this week.
So he'll come and talk with us in April, and it's just so funny. It's so small and so
wonderful.
big at the same time.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Well, we're very grateful for your participation in our community all the time. You bring us your vintage shirts, you donate wood.
Thank you.
You drove 4 hours to get here this morning.
That was probably the hardest commute
you've ever had.
Right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me, letting me blather.
And thank you all for coming down here to be with us.
So flattered. Thank you.
And to our virtual audience, thanks for being here, and we will see you at the end of February. Take care, everyone.